Pain is inevitable, yet suffering is optional when selling. An interview with Caitlin Doemner.
Welcome to Sales Babble, the podcast that shares selling secrets for non-sellers. And now your host, Pat Helmers.
Hello, Sales Babblers. This is Pat Helmers, and today we're going to take a break from the Tao of Sales Babble. And I invited a guest to join us and babble about an emerging branch of sales. Our guest is Caitlin Doemner. She's a speaker, author, and podcast host at Ecstatic Business podcast. Caitlin's an entrepreneur and somatic psychology researcher. What's that stuff? Well, we're going to babble about her interest in blending ancient wisdom with neuroscience and how it can transform sales performance, your sales performance. Today, we dive into enhancing emotional intelligence in a way that eliminates pain and suffering when selling. But before we get to today's episode, make sure and subscribe to the podcast. That way, you'll never miss an episode. And so, with no further ado, let's get to it. Welcome, Caitlin. Are you ready to babble?
I'm ready to babble.
Caitlin, we're going to take a departure from the Tao Te Ching and Lao Tzu and all his wise thoughts on selling and whatnot. And I thought I would break up the podcast and have you come visit us because you're doing something very, very interesting. I'm looking at your LinkedIn right here, and you consider yourself a brain optimization expert, specializing in neuroscience and somatic techniques. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not going to say I'm a neuroscientist. Those people get really nerdy. But I love geeking out on all of the brain journals and then asking myself, well, what does this actually mean for the normal human? And especially with my background in sales and sales management, I'm always thinking specifically for my sales people. How can this help you get better, increase your performance, decrease your anxiety, help your clients more effectively? So wherever that intersection of philosophy, psychology, and brain science intersect, I really love talking about that niche.
Me too, which is why I kind of broke a rule. I don't really interview many people. And you and I were chatting, I think, a week or two ago about this. But I think this is such an interesting topic, and I think there's so much potential here that I think it's well worth we're speaking at. You said you were a sales manager. Maybe you just give us a very quick take on what your past is in regards to selling.
Absolutely. So I sort of found my way into sales accidentally. I think most of us do. But I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I had in my master's degree in business administration. And so I just started failing miserably at everything I could lay my hands on: real estate investing, MLM. And then I was like, I'm going to be a business coach, because those who can't teach, evidently. And from there, I found a business partner, and he said, well, you don't have to sell. I just want you to be my appointment setter. And so I scheduled appointments for him. He closed deals for our first client. That was working. He said, well, let's go build a sales team. And so we went and we built a sales team, and now we were hiring appointment setters and closers. And we made about $250,000 in 2 weeks for our first paid client. And that proved that the model worked. And so then we went and we were interviewed by Robert Scrobe of the Internet Marketers Association. And he introduced us to Allie Brown, who was one of the biggest coaches in the industry. And we built this company, virtualcoachingsales.com. Within the second year, my partner decided to go start a marketing agency, and I was now about to give birth to my second kid. And I was like, crap, I need to figure out how to do this by myself. It was kind of a go big or go home moment. And so decided, okay, I've got to take ownership of this whole sales process, and went out and closed my own first client. And that was our biggest deal to date. It was about a $300,000 contract. And we built and managed their sales team. And then that sort of led to probably our biggest name client in the personal development industry is Deepak Chopra. So building his sales team for his coaching programs. And that's been my background, is sort of figuring out how to sell and how to manage sales teams through a lot of trial and error. And for me, the thing that shifted all of this from hating sales and being afraid of the telephone to being now like the sales whisperer is that I realized that sales is an act of love and service. And it's in that moment of making a decision that we can change people's destinies. And so the salesperson, when they're doing their job well, is really creating a sacred space for people to articulate their highest dreams, their deepest fears, and we can hold space and give them courage to step forward and make the shifts in their life that they know that they want to make. They just don't necessarily know how. And so we really get to create ripples of impact in the work that we do, assuming that we're selling programs and packages and products that we believe in and are actually creating a positive transformation in the world.
Right, adding value to your clients, that they actually see that.
Yeah.
You had done the hard part, though, in setting up. It's hard closing deals. I don't mean it's not, but setting up the original appointment, the part that's the hard part, just to get people to show up on the phone.
I didn't realize it at the time. I thought that was the easiest part. I'm like, oh, you just want me to call people and listen to their problems and help them find a solution? I can do that. That's easy, because I didn't put the word sales on it. I just was getting to know people and helping them solve problems. And that was intuitive. I could do that in my sleep. So as soon as I could separate the skills that make people successful from the title we give it, namely selling, then I was fine. It was easy for me to do the actual work as long as I didn't think of it as selling. But I had so many mental blocks around what it meant to be in sales as a salesperson, all of that stigma of the used car salesman who's hustling and sleazy and pushy and manipulative. And I could let go of all of that baggage that I associated with this industry and just do the work of listening, deep questions, finding problems, identifying gaps, holding space to have them overcome their own objections. Really, I don't really teach objection handling so much as helping them to identify, where is this a belief that you want to shift? If you think that money is scarce, how can we shift the belief that money is not scarce, it's infinite, and you have access to it at any time? If you think you don't have enough time, how can we shift it and recognize that time is, yes, it's a finite resource, but it's simply a reflection of your priorities, that you, me, and Richard Branson all only have 24 hours in our day, right? And so just prioritizing and just kind of walking through the things that they think are holding them back and helping them understand that this is really the thing which, if viewed correctly, is actually pushing you forward.
You went down this path of neuroscience and what you call somatic techniques, which is a word I'm not familiar with, and I'm assuming the listeners aren't familiar with. How did you come to that next step on your journey?
So my husband and I built this organization, our sales agency, and it wasn't enough, right? I had done the master's degree, and it wasn't enough. I built the business and wrote books, and it wasn't enough. And I kept pushing myself forward, and I was like, well, why am I doing all this? What is the point of being a successful entrepreneur? And I said, well, I want to travel the world. So my husband and I made this decision. We were going to travel the world. And so we did. For 3 years, we took our 3 kids. We hit all 7 continents, 25 countries. And I was sitting on a tropical beach in Southeast Asia and looking at the beautiful water and realizing it's still not enough. Like, I was still struggling with anxiety. I was still struggling with depression. I had changed everything I could possibly change in my external environment. I was living what most people would feel is their dream life, married to my high school sweetheart, running a successful company, living in beautiful exotic locations, ultimate time and location freedom. I literally had every box you could possibly want to checked. And I still wasn't happy. And I said, maybe the problem is you, Caitlin. Yeah. So just this idea that I had
one
run
commonality.
Right? The only thing that is in common is me. Everywhere you go, there you are. And so that led me onto this inner search of, okay, well, what does it mean to be happy? And started doing I had studied philosophy of religion at Oxford. I had already a pretty deep spiritual life. I had studied philosophy in college. So I really understood a lot of how the worldviews that were available in the world. And then I wanted to see what's next. So I started studying brain science. The word somatic comes from soma, which is your physical body and the knowing that's associated with it. So the way I like to think about somatics is the energy that has made up your body has existed since the Big Bang. This energy is not created or destroyed. So the actual energy that is in you has been around since the beginning of time. The actual atoms that were created are trillions of years, like billions and billions of years old. They were created when supernovas exploded, right? And all of those atoms came together into molecules, and your mother's body pulled together the right molecules from everything that she ate and from the tens of thousands of years of ancestors that came before her. And you are this perfect creature that has the wisdom of your ancestors and the stars and the cosmos living in every single one of your cells. So whatever you believe about God or the universe or force or however you talk about it, your very DNA has intelligence in it. And so what I have discovered is that very frequently when we get ourselves into psychological rut, it usually starts with an experience, and then we tell a story about that experience. We create meaning from it. That creates a belief system, and then our beliefs reinforce our experiences, and we go around looking for things that give us data to support our beliefs. And so those kind of traumatic incidences will impact our bodies. Trauma, physical, like spiritual trauma, emotional trauma can actually have a physical impact. You actually can see DNA shift in response to trauma. Well, what's interesting is most approaches to changing our psychology follow the same pattern. Well, let's start with the brain, then we'll go to the emotions, and then we'll see if we can shift the body experience. And a lot of talk-based therapies, they relive the past for years, trying to unravel all of those things, and it goes through the exact same process that we use to code in the trauma. We're trying to decode the trauma. And what I've actually discovered through all of my research is that you can hack your way to faster results if you go in the opposite end. If you actually start at the body, then work your way through the emotions, and then end up in the mental space, you can really powerfully shift things almost instantly.
So what's an example? How would we use that in the context of selling?
So my favorite example of a somatic technique that you can use that's free and available no matter where you are, that you can use to regulate your nervous system is breath work. So the reason I love breath work is you can use it either as an upper or a downer. These are your brain-based chemistry. You can give yourself a shot of caffeine, except it's faster than caffeine, or you can give yourself a shot of Prozac, except it's faster than Prozac, and all you have to use is the air around you. So inside of your nervous system, we have we have a gas pedal and a brake. We have the sympathetic nervous system, which is our gas pedal. This is our fight, flight response. When you need energy, you want to push on the gas pedal. And we also have our parasympathetic response system, which is the brake. This is when we need to calm things down and soothe. And that's our rest and digest section. And so knowing that you have these two pedals in your body, breath, you can use your breath to either push on either lever when you need it. So let's say that you are going into, it's the middle of the afternoon, you're a little lethargic, maybe you had a big lunch, but you have to go into a sales presentation and you need to be on your game. Well, I would suggest going into the bathroom and doing 20 fast mouth breaths. So pretend that you're reaching up to the ceiling, grabbing a pull-up bar and pulling it down to your chest. and then reach out. So everything, like every breath, you pull this down and then you push it back up to the ceiling and then you pull it down. So you're just going, reaching up to the ceiling, pulling it down to your chest, pushing it up to the ceiling, pulling it down to your chest. And you just do 20 fast ones. So I'll do a couple so you can hear, like, it's loud. It goes, right? Very fast, very loud. It's through your mouth. And that activates your sympathetic nervous response. It also hyperoxygenates your brain. So you are going to feel electrified when you are done doing that. And you are going to show up alert. You're going to show up ready. You're going to be paying attention, and people will therefore pay attention to you. So when you want to hit your gas pedal in your body, fast, deep mouth breaths. And using the arms pumping is just a way to get your cardiovascular system involved and get your heart beating faster to move all that oxygen through your body quicker. So let's say now it's the middle, it's let's go early morning, right? It's early morning and your boss has called you in and you don't know why, but you suspect it's not good. And you are now feeling like, crap, am I going to get fired? I know there's been layoffs. What is he going to ask me? Is it about my KPIs? What's going on? And you can feel yourself starting to hyperventilate and get stressed out. This is when you want to hit the brakes. So we want to activate the parasympathetic response. So with this one, in about 60 seconds, what I recommend is that you just find a place where you can be alone. Doesn't even have to be alone. You could literally be at the boardroom table itself and your boss is criticizing you, and you could do this less obviously, but I just want you to focus on long, slow nose breaths. If your nose is congested, it's not the end of the world. You can do it through your mouth. It's just our noses breathe more slowly than our mouths do. So if you're doing it through your mouth, pretend like you're breathing through a teeny tiny straw to make sure that you're slowing yourself down. It should take about 8 seconds up and 8 seconds back. And you're really focused on expanding your diaphragm. So if your hand was on your belly, you would feel your belly expand and contract with each one of these long, slow nose breaths. And with each one, because we can get a little distracted, I highly recommend that my clients say the words thank you silently in their head as they're focusing on their breathing as a way to calm their monkey mind. So if I were narrating, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 out. And with each inhale and exhale, just mentally say, thank you. And the beautiful thing about the word thank you is it doesn't have to be specific. It doesn't have to be thank you to self or God or the people around you, although frequently you find things to be grateful for simply in the act of repeating the word thank you. And we have found that gratitude and conscious breathing are the fastest ways for you to activate the positive chemicals in your brain to soothe and regulate your nervous system and bring you back into what we call your upper hemisphere, where your executive functions lie. So you're going to be more creative, a better problem solver, more collaborative, and more open to opportunities. And so even just 60 seconds of conscious breathing and gratitude can get you centered and back in a state of equilibrium so that you can show up with the presence, the calmness, the ability to respond, not react, that you want to when you're going into a stressful situation.
So what kind of results have you seen from the people that you've worked with?
So with somatic, I think of it almost as triage work. So this is where we are just
triage.
Just trying
that does
to
not
stop
sound good whatsoever.
Right? So most people in modern America work environments are operating with highly dysregulated nervous systems, which means we are constantly living in a fight or fight response. Historically, anthropologically, this is because that sympathetic nervous response was really powerful and useful when we were actually getting chased by a tiger. When there was a physical threat, then it would be really easy for us to just run. But then after we're done running and we're safe, our bodies turn that off and we go, You can actually see prey when they've been chased by a predator and they get free. They actually shake their bodies. And what they're doing is they're shaking that cortisol out of their system and they're bringing themselves back into homeostasis. Humans are no longer being chased by tigers, but we sense tigers around us 24/7. We are constantly surrounded by the threat of things that are scary, but they're unseen. And so our body can never turn itself off. And nobody has taught us how to shake the cortisol out of our system. So most of my clients, when we work with them, we start with the body work and just teach them these basic body techniques to just start bringing awareness to their emotional experience and their physical experience, and give them some physical things to just, you might need to clean this up, but calm the fuck down, right? Like, we just need you to get regulated, and then we can do the hard work. So remember, we tend to go head, heart, body, but in reverse, we go body, heart, head. In here, we go from the body work next into the emotional work. And we start noticing what is the emotional sensations that I'm feeling. And we start going into what are the stories that we're telling. And I promise I am answering your question. It's just taking me a circuitous way to get there. So with the emotional work,
I'm giving you space here. I want everybody here. I'm giving you.
So with the emotional work, after we've said, how are you feeling physically? Then we say, how are you feeling emotionally? And we try to teach people how to put names to their emotional responses. Brene Brown has a whole book called Atlas of the Heart that I highly recommend people read, because most of us just don't have a very rich vocabulary for emotions. It's sort of like colors. If you only think that there are 7 colors because that's what you learned Roy G. Biv in growing up, you're wrong. Our brain can sense actually closer to 30 trillion color shades. It's insanity. But we almost never see them if we don't have a word for them. Same thing with emotions. Understanding the nuances between envy or jealousy or anger or wrath, right? So these sorts of nuances of emotional vocabulary help us to have a more conscious experience of what's happening emotionally. And the work that I do longer term with clients is I say, okay, now we have an emotional experience. Now we get to go back to the story, because facts don't create emotions. Facts are just things. They just happen. Stories create emotion. So if we feel the emotion, we go find the story. And then we can look at the facts and say, what's a different way that we could tell this story? So let's say there's a big lunch event and your boss doesn't invite you to the big lunch event. The story you could create is, I'm not appreciated. I'm going to get passed over for promotion. I should start looking for another job. Why doesn't anybody like me in this stupid culture? Right? And we have this emotional response of like rejection and anxiety and frustration. And then we find out later our boss didn't invite us because it wasn't going to be a relevant meeting and they didn't want to waste your time. And they actually think so highly of you that they wanted to protect your schedule, not distract you from getting your work done. Right? Now we have a different emotional response. Now it's, oh, I am appreciated, and that makes me feel appreciative. I feel respected, and that makes me want to extend respect, right? So we have an entirely different emotional response. And this work, so the body work can happen pretty quickly. You can have a physical response within a couple of minutes. We can have an emotional shift within a couple of, well, I would say usually in a 30-minute window, but sometimes it's very quick. So I had a woman who was telling me a story, and she said that her dad had left when she was 2 and had just disappeared from her world. And that had left her feeling unworthy, and she thought he'd abandoned her. And that, so we had these stories of abandonment that created beliefs of unworthiness that had an emotional response of, I don't feel great. And she had actions that reinforced her unworthiness. And I said, well, what if we could tell a different story? What if the most generous interpretation that we can give is that your father thought so little of himself, that he was so unworthy of being a father. He loved you so much that he felt that the best way that he could love you and prepare you for your future was to exit your world and let you be on your own.
I've known people to do that, actually. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What if that was the story, right? That your dad actually loved you as best he could with where he was at and what he had. And she's like, oh my gosh. And it was literally less than 5 minutes that we told a different story, and it changed everything, right? Because she was rewriting decades of suffering and rethinking like, oh my gosh, maybe my dad loved me so much that that was the best way he could show his love for me was to leave the picture. And now she gets to move forward with a different story, different belief systems. Now she's treasured, she's loved, she's worthy. Now she's going to have a different pattern moving forward. And so that's the emotional work that we do. Yeah.
So if people wanted to connect with you, if people heard this and they thought, yeah, I could see that. If people wanted to work with you, what's the best way for them to connecting with you and reach out to you and chat with you?
Yeah, probably find me on LinkedIn, Caitlin Doemner, Doemner. I think I'm the only one on there. And our company, ecstaticway.com, is where we're starting to do this somatic brain emotional work. And we're starting primarily with sales teams. So if you're in sales, we have an individual program. If you lead sales teams, we can come and do a corporate training. And it takes us about 12 weeks to go through the body work, the emotional work, or the mental work. But by the end, you can see some pretty remarkable productivity, external metrics. So calls going up, sales being closed, as they correlate to the subjective well-being score increasing as well. So what we find is that when people feel better, they do better.
I think that totally makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This is a very human thing that we're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially with sales. This is basically professional peopling.
Right. People in the persuasion business. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
If you could give our listeners one quick piece of advice, one thing they can take away from that they can work on today, what would that be?
I would want them to memorize 2 statements, and I want these to become the keystone for your entire philosophy. You can build out whatever you want in terms of gods in the universe, but start with 2 things. 1, that everything is always working out for you. Everything is always working out for you and the highest good of all involved. Secondly, everyone is always doing the best they can. They're doing the best they can with what they have and where they're at. And if you can trust that everything is working out and everyone's doing the best they can, I promise you can alleviate 99.9% of the experience of emotional suffering. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And those 2 mantras can shift your life.
Pain is inevitable, so suffering is optional.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of optional.
Yeah. And hey, sometimes I still choose to be in suffering. I still love those pity parties from time to time. I'm like, I am throwing a pity party and you are not invited. But I get to wallow delightfully.
You can make it smaller, though. You can make that period smaller.
Right.
You don't have
to
absolutely drag it out like for, forever for some people. They won't let it go, right?
Yes.
So.
And the biggest thing of suffering is feeling like you are stuck, that you're the victim. So now for me, when I go into cycles of anger or grieving or heartache, it's not, because the goal is not to not feel the full color spectrum. It is. We want you to feel all the feelings. It's just recognizing that you are in a state of choice at every moment. You can choose to continue to be angry or sad, or you can choose to shift it. And like I said, there are times when I'm like, I know that I have the tools that I need to shift this experience, and I'm not ready yet. And I give myself permission to just not be ready to shift that yet. But it puts me back in the power seat. And now I can enjoy the sensation, and it sounds really twisted, but I can enjoy the sensation of being angry or being sad because I'm not helpless. I'm not a victim. I don't have to feel angry or sad. I'm choosing to. And that surprisingly makes all the difference.
Yep. Well, Caitlin, thank you very much for taking a moment to stop by here at the Sales Babble podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Pat. This has been fun.
Now, to find links to today's episode and to learn more about Caitlin Doemner, you can find those in the show notes at salesbabble.com. And while you're there, you can sign up for our brief weekly newsletter with links to the podcast sent conveniently in your inbox. Now, if you got any questions about sales, don't hesitate to reach out. Find me on LinkedIn or click the Babble Me link on the website. Sales is one of my favorite topics. I'd love to help you out. With that said, that's all I've got for today. Until next Tuesday, take care and have a highly successful and a profitable selling day.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Babble podcast. Find us at www.salesbabble.com.
This is a production of Habanero Media.